my name's Jules, and this is The Secret Mind. Today, I'm going to talk, yesterday on the news, you may remember, if you're in the UK, the PRIORY Hospital Group, mental hospitals that have a lot of NHS contracts, are being investigated for not keeping people safe and the number of deaths on their facilities. Deaths, of course, are just the tip of the iceberg. Beyond or before death, there's a lot of potentially very poor care, isn't there? I mean, how poor does it have to be to actually, for death to be the result? It's not my job, I suppose, to second guess them, but it's not in the least surprising. This is a story of the problems we have in interacting with the mental health interface between hospital and the rest of the world out here in normal world, in primary care land, if you like, in your world and mine. So it's me being me about some of the things that go on there. Hopefully you'll get the idea. Here we go. It's called, subtitled it, a referral, in inverted commas, to custody. Okay, so maybe I'm grumpy. 12 and a half hours into a 12-hour shift, and it had been a mental day, by which I mean a day of mental assessments, now grinding to a close with a referral regarding the recent arrest of a man who is already detained under a section of our illustrious Mental Health Act. A referral to custody. Just let that sink in for a moment. I'm sure that the psychology team didn't look at it that way. They had had just about enough of their patient and decided that their expert holding facility was not the place for him anymore. So where do you send somebody when you're already in the correct facility? Exactly how do you get them out of your eye line? Traditionally, in medicine, when you don't have the skills to deal with your patient, you refer to somebody who does. Ideally, that involves a process of communication, professional liaison, sharing of information, discussion of a plan of action, and maybe even something approximating to common decency. Or, more commonly, just vaguely pointing them towards the nearest accident and emergency department. This man is already an inpatient in a psychiatric hospital. Yes, I know. You thought they didn't have any beds left. Well, they do, but only for the people they speculate are important enough. Frequently, as you may know from picking up any newspaper, their powers at predicting who should be in residential supervision are troublingly inaccurate. A cynic might claim that their formulated opinions of risk fare little better than chance. But at least they're formed. They have the appearance of gravitas. And in this game, that's important. Of course, one would hope that they're not just formed, but informed, hopefully wielding an understanding of human nature like a surgeon wields a scalpel, or at least balanced with sufficient nuance to counter the level of false comfort that has gone into squeezing them into some chapter or other of the DSM criteria, currently DSM-5. That book, by the way, has expanded its selection box of diagnoses by 33% in the latest edition, as a tour de force of American ingenuity. This forcing and squeezing supports an apparently valid psychiatric opinion in the same way that you might make an amount of corned beef fit into the shape of a tin, specifically a corned beef tin. Too cynical? Well, you'll have to forgive me. I've seen too much unsupervised sub-competence to let it pass without observation. Primary care manages 99% of the world's psychiatric problems. Psychiatrists, the other 1%, consulting my patients maybe once or twice a year. So be clear, mental health is primarily managed under the specialism of primary care, the specialty formerly known as general practice. The fact is that those brief specialist assessments might be a good deal worse than suspected. I would frequently favour the value judgment of a clued-in relative or the instinct of a police sergeant's assessment over a health worker asking standard questions from a mental health checklist of questionable validity and usefulness in a custody scenario. Of those that get the golden ticket to Bedlam, the weeks they stay in mental hospital before they get round to being on the receiving end of a full assessment is an unprosecuted crime. From these comments, you may think that I'm anti-psychiatry. I'm not. I thoroughly valued my time as a junior psychiatrist in St George's Hospital in Morpeth. After my house jobs and my first 6 months in casualty, I made sure I did a psychiatry job as soon as I could. It seemed to me that this would play into everything I ever went near, and it still amazes me that many GPs are permitted to do general practice without having done such a residency. No wonder they struggle to do anything for their patients other than prescribe brain drugs of dubious efficacy. I even took on a little project at St George's to go back into the original notes of the long-term residents. These were deep files that nobody had pored over in years, if ever they had at all. Many of the residents had come to that status through a physical illness, such as a stroke, in a time where this was looked upon as an opportunity for institutionalization rather than medical care. They shared their space with severely unruly schizophrenics. Sometimes even a visit to some of the facilities was a challenge to the senses, but coping with living there could push anybody to madness. Some had spent the majority of their adult lives there, and barring the government's plan to close down these facilities, would have died there. Many did. It was home, after all. St George's Hospital sat in fields that were green and vast. A cardiac arrest call would go out at times of demise, but this would still involve finding your Ford Fiesta as soon as possible and driving to an outbuilding. Rarely were heroics expected or delivered. It was the way things were. If the place didn't happen to have the word hospital in the title, surely a cardiac arrest bleep would have been inappropriate. Nevertheless, even if it was the agreed decision to do nothing, such a call-out seemed an appropriate way to support the institution, the nurses, and the story of a life. Today, however, and somehow, by some authority unknown, and presumably in a response to an event undescribed, these modern-day counterparts are now sending their patients back to custody because they cannot cope. And right here and right now, that means for my assessment. Just to recap, representatives of the regional army of mental health workers are sending their patient back to police custody where only one doctor covers the entire specialty and county. At some point, in an hour or two, will be my inevitable departure, and at that moment, there will not be a doctor on the premises, or any health staff for that matter. Yet, the psychiatry hospital has decided that this is currently the best place for their patient. The excursion will provide neither closure nor resolution, but that is a luxury not to be expected. Nobody will challenge the psychiatric care. There will be nobody else to support the police in having to take a man detained under section back to a tawdry holding bay instead of continuing his hospital care with increased safeguards. I'm confident the police will keep him safe. But more than that, even in this uncomfortable environment, I know they will be able to calm him down in the way that the psychiatric staff couldn't, and eventually, I imagine he'll be returned to continue his excellent inpatient care as proclaimed by those that provide the branding and marketing for the local mental health teams. But the truth is, the police keep people safe well, very well, and I like that. Even so, it is not the patient I feel bad for. Honestly, he seems to be enjoying the attention of his day out. He'll certainly be getting a lot more undivided attention today than any other day on his psychiatric ward. If you get the chance, talk to someone who's been under a section. The days they spend with nobody doing anything approximating to treatment or assessment is mind-flabbering. So little has changed in a couple of decades since I was a psychiatry doctor roaming the corridors and extensive outbuildings of St George's in what was charmingly known as Mental Morpeth. A beautiful town in itself and recently voted the most desirable place to live in England. But when Stannington Hospital, another now closed psychiatric facility, was so close by, well, what can I say? To have one mental hospital is one thing, but two? That's just carelessness. So, mental Morpeth it was. It's the police I feel for. They control so many situations and are so openly criticised when dealing with mentally fragile people. Why should their place of work be a referral area for the medical specialists who cannot cope with the few patients they do admit? Of course, they're correct in looking to me for a medical assessment of their latest arrival, and I'm confident that between us we'll do the job that needs to be done on the line of last resistance. But I'm frustrated that so little information is forthcoming from the experts. Should I pick up that phone and try to beg someone to give up some useful morsel of contextual information? Prior experience tells me that could be time poorly spent, and I'd rather spend it talking to my patient. More likely than not, the psychiatric hospital would close me down due to some misplaced idea of confidentiality that they got from a training course, saying the phone is a dangerous way to communicate. I could start by bleating, "But you sent him to me," but it would make no difference at that point. Somebody crucial would undoubtedly be on their lunch. And as for an up-to-date medical assessment, oh, I don't know, the consultant's coming round on Thursday. That's the day we have our multidisciplinary meeting. Once you go through this a few times, you realise how and why they fail to plan for, prevent and deal with acute situations. Perhaps this is a learning opportunity. Could we be this optimistic? Well, let's talk this through. If you found that you were out of your depth after a sticky situation, maybe you could formulate a better plan for sticky situations. Why not bring it up at one of the famous multidisciplinary huddles and start a plan? Usually mental health people like plans. What am I saying? They love plans. And Thursdays. Maybe such a plan would look like this. It seems that we sent our patient to a forensic medical examiner. Why don't we find out what an FME is? Why don't we communicate with one and perhaps bring Pringles? Why not invite a policeman along too? Not a pen pusher, a proper one. Maybe we could all agree how we can all do better. Then we can all get naked, tiptoe through the tulips and sing the Age of Aquarius. Dear reader, it's never happened. So if it makes you feel better, you can just pretend that this is my grumpiness that's the problem. Then you'll feel happier writing this little moan off. And we can all get back to the status quo, making sure nothing ever changes. See you tomorrow.